Hello, my beautiful freaking people. Welcome back to another episode of FML Talk. I am so happy that we are back in action with you guys, and I am really excited for today's episode. When we took our hiatus, I asked you guys on my Instagram what you wanted to see more of in the new year and what type of guests you wanted me to bring on. And everybody was really insistent on wanting to hear from someone who has cheated. Now, we had already recorded Lauren's episode, so I knew that we were going to have the female perspective of someone who chose to cheat and what they went through and what that situation was like. But I wanted to get a man on here because a lot of you wanted to hear from the people that you are being cheated on, which are the males. So today's guest, you probably know, and I cannot wait to share this interview with you guys. It's gonna be a really good one. So grab a cocktail. Welcome back to FML Talk.
Oh my God. Wait, how old was the other girl?
19. Can you believe that shit?
Hey, this is Gabrielle Stone.
Good book?
I did not do chapter 6 yet. He did what? 48 hours?
What a dick.
Yeah, but have you seen all the photos on our Instagram? And this is FML Talk.
Oh, no, she didn't.
Today's interview, the day I recorded it, happened at a really interesting time in my life because I had just gotten the news that one of my good friends was experiencing and dealing with some infidelity. And it was really shocking for me to find out. And, you know, a lot of people, when I was having certain conversations dealing with getting this news, a lot of people kept saying to me, God, you must be so triggered. You must be triggered by, people being unfaithful. You must be triggered by the fact that, this happens so often and to people that you would never expect it from. And I took a step back and I was talking to Tay about it. And after, he lovingly assured me that was never going to be happening in our relationship, I realized that it wasn't those things that I was triggered about. I was triggered around what this person in my life was about to go through because I know the emotional battle that ensues when you find out that someone has betrayed your trust, betrayed your body, and my heart kind of like broke for them. And it was so weird that all coincided with the day that I was recording this interview because it brought up so many feelings and emotions and things that I don't really think about anymore because I've healed and moved past so much of it. And whenever that happens in my life, weird coincidences like that, I know that it's the universe kind of pointing out something for me in my life. So I had this moment after I found out this news where I kind of broke down with Tay and was like, I just kind of need to cry because it almost made me lose faith in humanity a little bit. And it was such a beautiful moment for Tay and I to sit there and talk and reconnect about some of those old triggers that I have from past relationships and that he has too. It brought up a lot of stuff for him as well. So it ended up being this kind of weird blessing in our relationship that we could sit down and have those like open and honest conversations that we don't always feel we have to because everything's fine with us and we're happy. And it really was a nice reminder how far I've come, how stable and happy my relationship is right now, and a nice reminder to just connect on a daily basis. I gotta be honest with you guys, I was a little nervous for this interview because it isn't just some random guy who cheated that I brought on the show to grill and go in on. He's actually the husband of a really good friend of mine. So when I found out that he agreed to do this and that he was going to be coming on FML Talk, I got a little nervous. I never usually prep for my interviews. I normally just kind of jump in and bring them on. But this was a special case. And I knew that you all had a lot of questions that you submitted. And I knew that everybody was really going to want me to, get to the bottom of a few things and not necessarily go easy on him. So I was a little nervous at the beginning of this. So I want to remind all of my awesome FMLers out there that it takes a lot of fucking balls to agree to come onto a public platform and discuss things like cheating to a predominantly woman-based audience. So be kind, listen with an open heart, and I hope we can all learn from this awesome interview. Because of the nature of this topic and the conversation that we ended up having and how deep we really ended up diving in to everything, I decided to not cut anything from this interview and instead break it up into 2 separate episodes. So you're going to hear part 1 this week, and then part 2 will air next Wednesday. I think there was so much valuable information and truth that came from this interview that I didn't want to do a disservice to you guys by cutting it short to fit it into 1 episode. So without further ado, I would like to bring on our guest today. He is a former pro football player. He hosts a very successful podcast of his own. And he is my good friend, Miss Jana Kramer's husband, Mike Caussin. Mike Caussin, welcome to FML Talk.
What's up?
Dude, I'm so stoked that you agreed to do this. My listeners were all very insistent that I had someone on who had cheated in the past and was willing to come on and talk about it and really share an honest version of it. So I'm really excited that you're here to do that.
I am excited to come and talk about that. I'm sure you had a long line of guys just ready to come on and talk about the mistakes that they've made. But yeah, I'm, me, Jana, our story. So I'm always willing to shed some light on the male perspective and hopefully help people kind of get an inside look on what goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's important because so many women and men and just couples in general go through that. It's a very common thing, unfortunately, that happens a lot. And a lot of times people are left with these questions and, not really getting closure, answers as to why something might have happened to them. So I think it's really important that we're able to dig into that and, get behind some of the whys as to why it takes place.
For sure. And can I ask what set up this episode? What did you guys talk about recently that kind of had your fans and listeners being like, hey, let's get a guy's perspective?
Yeah. So, my story because we met on your successful podcast that you host with your lovely wife, Jana, that, I was married for almost 2 years, found out that he was having an affair for almost 6 months with a 19-year-old, filed for divorce. So I've been through the infidelity. I've been through the heartbreak with my relationship after that. And I think a lot of my listeners, because they all came from my book, relate to heartbreak, have been cheated on. And it's wild, the kind of DMs that I get from people that have gone through stuff that's so similar, Yeah,
it's unfortunate that when you share, when you share that kind of vulnerable pain, how many people are out there that have gone through the same thing? And when we see everyone's best version of themselves via social media, right? We're like, oh, their relationship must be perfect, this and that. You're like, I must be the only one that's been cheated on. I must be the only one going through this pain. And then you realize once you open up how many people are really in the middle of going through that.
Yeah. And I think it makes people feel a lot less alone and like it didn't happen to them, And the episode before this, one of my good girlfriends came on who was married and she was the one that had cheated. So we got kind of the female perspective of it. But I know a lot of my listeners, have been cheated on by men and wanted to have a guy that was willing to open up about it. So you are the chosen one. No pressure.
Lucky me. I'm ready.
So I want to start by having you kind of set the stage for, my listeners that don't know your story, as far as how you and Jana met and kind of how the cheating really took place initially and what happened in that.
For sure. I'll give you like the elevator pitch of,
Yeah.
of our multi-chapter story. But basically, Jan and I met via social media, Twitter, back when Twitter was the thing,
Right.
7 years ago now. And, it was a quick romance. We fell in love quick and hard. I cheated early on, about a month or two into our relationship, just dating. And she, part of why we connected so early is that we were both honest with each other and being like, hey, we haven't been perfect boyfriends and girlfriends. Like, we both cheated, we both owned it. And that was the first time I'd ever done that too. So I was like, oh man, this is definitely different. But I still did it, and it was a big pain that she was like, I changed for you, you didn't change for me. But we reconciled, and she kind of wrote it off because her imperfections in the past was like, okay, he made a mistake, he's learned from it, let's keep going.
Right.
And I was faithful until, unfortunately, my bachelor party before our wedding, which I ended up meeting my affair partner, along with other women that I was involved with over the next couple of years. Got discovered, went to rehab for sex addiction, which at the time I was just doing just to salvage my marriage because
Right.
Jana and her therapist were like, you got to do something about this. You got to go somewhere and figure this out. So I did. And then through that 60-day process of inpatient treatment, I realized that this had been a pattern in my life. And a lot goes into that. It's a false pretense that people have in judgment about sex addiction, that it's a married man's excuse or a married man's disease.
Right.
Being in the 12-step program for the past 4 or 5 years, I've seen everyone from every walk of life, every age, every creed, color, religion, sexual orientation, all of it. So it's not just a married man's disease as people might think. And then, so over the past 4.5 years now, we've been working at reconciling our marriage, strengthening it through infidelity. I've had my missteps along the way with my sobriety. Nothing physically acting out with anybody else, but a big part of that is the lies and deceit, right? A lot of people that have been cheated on, it comes from the lies, it comes from that deceit, it comes from that excitement, quote unquote excitement that people might feel from that double life. So that's where we are now, and we're very open about it. Originally not by choice. Our story got sold to Us Weekly.
You guys are you deal with everything in a much more public way, which makes everything 10 times harder. I mean, when I was going through my divorce, it was, the community knew and our circles and friends knew. And even that was really hard. And like you go through the guilt and the shame and the embarrassment. So you guys are dealing with it on a worldly scale.
Yeah. And that was tough to deal with, especially early on. I didn't want to acknowledge anything. I wanted a typical guy. I wanted to sweep it under the rug, move on, put your head down, whatever, get over it. And then Jana was the one that convinced me, like, look, we can help people here. Like, there is a silver lining. Like, let's try to do this. And it took me some time to get there. And then finally, once I did, I started seeing the benefit, not only for helping other people, but for ourselves. Like you said early on in the episode about not feeling so alone, it was really therapeutic for both Jana and I.
Yeah, I bet. So when she first found out about everything, once you guys were married, did you tell her or did she catch you?
No, a good friend of hers, she's a very intuitive person. Jana was kind of venting to her about some things, and she was like, well, do you think he's cheating on you? She was like, no. She's like, well, look into stuff. So Jana looked into my phone bill, saw a bunch of random numbers, looked into them, realized it was something that a married man shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. She confronted me via FaceTime because she was out of town on it. Okay. And I was like a statue. It was that stomach churning. I'm getting caught. And I ended up disclosing more information than she even knew. I told her about my affair partner that she had no idea about. So she was kind of fishing early on, but I disclosed more. But then, thing is too, when you get caught, you want to minimize things, right?
Right.
It was only one person. It was only this. It was only a few times. And then just over the next year or two, it's just more things kind of came out because we didn't do a healthy disclosure.
Right.
Which is,
and then you have to go through that stomach churning situation time and time and time again.
Just her constantly figuring things out because she's just, wants to be a detective and figure everything out for safety, which I totally understand.
Yeah.
And I just want to run away from it. Be
Right.
like, okay, I'm sorry, like, slap on the wrist, like, let's move on. That's easy for me to say because I'm the asshole.
Sure. Right.
So, yeah.
So when she discovered all this, she confronted you on FaceTime. You weren't with your affair partner when she called you. She just was calling you out.
Yeah, I was at home with our daughter. She was out of town for work. I was at home. I just put our daughter to bed. And, I felt a weird vibe from her kind of all day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just that guilt intuition that just knew something was up.
Yeah.
Did
she know your affair partner?
No.
Okay.
No, that's, one thing that Jana and I have talked about is the way both of us, like the way our kind of love languages are and the way that we are as people is Jana, she wants connection, she wants love, she wants intimacy. So like if she ever stepped out of the marriage, it would probably be somebody that we know.
Right.
Be someone that she's close to, that's a friend, that
like an emotional connection.
Right. For me, it has to be like I can't know the person. I can't have any other connection with them because that's just too intimate, too emotional, too uncomfortable.
Right.
Because that's just the way I am with intimacy.
Did your affair partner want those things, like want more than just the sex, or was it like that for her too?
She was married as well, so it was mutual. And what's so sad when I look back on it, it's like during that time when I was doing that and acting out, I thought, as sick as this is, I thought I was like living the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it just fucking pains me to even say that I thought I was living the dream because I was having my cake and eating it too. My affair partner was married, so she wasn't going to say shit.
Right.
And it was just a terrible way to live.
Yeah. The pressure of trying to keep things secret and like holding that secret on your heart and in your chest, it like that shit must really weigh on someone.
Oh yeah. And you naturally take it out on your significant other.
Yeah.
They become the punching bag.
When all of my ex-husband's stuff came to light, I was like, dude, you must be fucking exhausted. Like he had a second phone. He was like, lying to go to places. And it was just like, you must be exhausted. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you even like, just leave, dude? Obviously we didn't have kids. So it was very, very different. I know that was a big factor and we'll get to that. Yeah. So what did you feel, if anything, was missing in your marriage that made you want to have this extramarital affair going on?
I was missing. I can understand the people that say, well, my spouse doesn't give me enough attention. Well, it's because I tried to do that. I tried to blame Jana tenfold. Like in my mind, I was justified. Mm-hmm. I was like, what I'm doing isn't wrong because she's a B, she's a pain in my ass, she's this, she's that. When really I was just lost. I was, these aren't excuses, but they're explanations is kind of what I say, right? The sex addiction is an excuse, it's an explanation to certain behaviors. And along with that was me transitioning out of professional sports. So left the job I've only ever known, the only career I've ever known. I moved to a completely new state, living with a woman I've never lived with anybody before. All these, we got married, got engaged, got married, bought a house, had a kid. And I transitioned out of the only career I've ever known, all within 12 months.
Right.
And so I'm making every major life change in this short window. And I didn't have the emotional tools to express what was going on with me. I didn't know how. I've never had a healthy relationship where I went to my partner and said, hey, I'm feeling this shit. Like, can you help me? Can we talk about this?
Yeah.
I just always point the finger. And it's like, well, the reason I'm feeling this way is probably because of them, which is bullshit. Mm-hmm. So, because I'd never done therapy to that point, nothing. So looking back on it, it was my inability to connect with another human being, my inability to express myself emotionally in a healthy way, and ask for help.
Yeah. I think that I identify with that a lot, because when I did an episode on cheating and there were a lot of questions, is like, why do people choose to do it? In my opinion, it's not ever because they're unhappy with the other person. It doesn't matter who they're going to, where they're getting it from. They're seeking that validation that they're missing inside themselves.
100%. And something that Jan and I have said on repeat is, something that I realized through all my kind of my therapy and self work is people want to blame the other person, exactly like you said, but if they don't change themselves, it's going to be the same story, different cast.
Yeah.
If I don't work on myself and I was like, oh, it's all Jan's fault, you know what? Fuck this. I want to get divorced. We'll co-parent our daughter. I'll go to somebody else. I wouldn't have fixed shit that was going on with me.
Right.
I would have been the same damn person, probably would have done it to that poor woman.
Yeah.
And it would be just the cycle again.
And it's like, dude, your wife's fucking hot. Like, if I swang that way, I would bang her, Like
100%. She's, and that's like, I'm like, what's wrong with me? I'm like, she's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And it's like, and that just goes to show that it, not just the physical aspect, but it's not about them. It's 100% about the person that is the one doing it.
Yeah. And I get, some random guys that'll comment on my videos that are like, oh my God, how did someone cheat on you? Like, what's wrong with people? And I'm like, guys, J-Lo got cheated on. Like, it's
right.
about the person. It's about what the cheater is lacking within themselves that they haven't been able to like fill and fix.
100%. Let me ask you a question real quick, not to turn the tides, but when you found out your husband was cheating, because Jana and I get asked this question on a regular basis, like, why did you stay?
Yeah.
Like, or why did you not stay? So my question to you is just, was that just one of those non-negotiables? If it happens, I'm out, end of story? Or was he not willing to do any work? Like, kind of what was that situation like?
Mine was kind of interesting because, I had never even really thought of it. Like, I had never sat down and been like, well, if someone ever cheats on me, I'm gone. Because I had never thought that he was capable of doing that. So it never was even a thing that I had negotiated with myself in my mind. But I think in my particular situation, I had been so unhappy for so long with him. I just didn't realize why, but I wasn't in love with him. I loved him as a person. And I think I married him because he was safe. So when I found all this out and like how deep it all went, it almost was like, Gabrielle, this is your out. Like, you can either stay and work on your marriage and probably be miserable for another 3 years and then get a divorce, or you can know your worth and fucking bounce. Would that have been different if I was in love with him? Probably. I don't know. Would it have been different if we had kids in the picture to think about? Probably. I don't know, but my situation with my ex-husband and yours and Jana's situations are vastly different.
So different.
Yeah. Besides the fact that, and even quite frankly, even if I would have sat there and cried and said, I want to work on things, please don't leave, I don't think he wanted to either. I think the way you said earlier, how people justify it in their mind, I think he was so deep down a sociopathic rabbit hole that he had justified everything. And it was like he was ready to go be a totally different person, which he very much so is now.
Wow.
Like if you put pictures of him from when we got married and now, you'd be like, that's not the same person physically, like not the same person. Yeah.
It's so interesting because so many people from the outside looking into like situations like both of ours, they make it so black and white, right? Like if that happens, you leave. If that happens, like how could you stay? And there's so many variables, like to your point, that are involved in that, what Jan and I've always said is you don't know until you're in that situation. You don't know, because there's all those factors. And I 100% own that if we did not have our daughter at the time, Jan would have been gone.
Oh, really?
100% believe that. Yeah. And I think she would tell you that too.
Yeah. That's heavy. That's heavy.
Yeah. They say never to stay for the kids, but we acknowledge that it was a blessing in disguise to get us to where we are now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
It was the catalyst you needed to stay to do the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really feel like God had that in our lives, and that he, blessed us with our son at the time that he did too, because literally Jana was ready to divorce me again. And then that when we walked out of that couples therapy session where she was telling our couples therapist in LA, like, I'm done. On the street corner, we're walking away from each other. She's like, by the way, I'm pregnant.
Stop it.
Kid you not. And I like stop in my tracks. And we live like a half a mile from our therapist's office, which is perfect. So one of us could drive home, the other could walk home. And I just stopped in my tracks. I'm like, what? But looking back on that too, that was like that sign from God to be like, all right, motherfuckers, like, you guys are meant to be together. I put you all together for a reason.
Right.
You both have to dive in. You got to do this work. You got to make a change. And that's when for me personally, I really ramped up my recovery, my change in how I handle things moving forward, and I've continued to do so.
And so we're going to get to the sex addiction stuff later, because I am very interested to hear your take on all of that. But let's back up a little bit. So you were in therapy after the first kind of initial, she had discovered the cheating, you had disclosed things to her, and then over the next year, more and more kind of trickled out, right? Mm-hmm. So when did it happen again? Like, it full blown happened again that she found out about, or was it more of like some shady indiscretion?
It was stuff that had happened during the timeline when I was cheating and acting out that I just didn't disclose. So it wasn't new stuff. It wasn't like, I found out yesterday you were talking to your affair partner again, or I found out you're watching porn or doing whatever. It was just stuff that, in that time of panic, I almost convinced myself that I forgot about, right? Because you're just so in shock of the whole situation, you just want to move on.
Yeah.
And so it was just things like that she dug around more. She had no shame in calling all these numbers that I called.
Well, yeah, because that trust is broken now. And she's trying to she's in fight or flight, trying to protect herself.
100%. So it was no new action. It was just her discovering past actions that I hadn't disclosed.
So once you had gone to rehab and come out, there was nothing further that happened. It was just her finding out more stuff that you hadn't talked about.
Correct.
Okay. So fast forward to that therapy session, and she thinks that you guys are getting a divorce, and she walks out and turns around and tells you that she's pregnant. Where did you guys go from there?
I think we still went our separate ways, if I recall. And then, we talked later about it. Yeah, I mean, through those initial years, she said divorce a lot. Yeah. Whereas only in the past year or two that I really set a boundary to be like, look, we're in this. We got 2 kids. The D word is like off the table for me.
Yeah.
Because I can't live my life where anytime we get in a fight, that's thrown in my face.
Sure.
And she's gotten good at it. She's gotten a lot better. She respects that boundary. But it took a serious talk, and it really was me owning a lot of stuff that I needed to continue to change.
Yeah.
Because I was changing at the time. I was 30, 29, 30. That was 30 years of being one way, processing things one way,
right?
Handling issues and emotions one way.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's crazy because you think you hit rock bottom until you hit rock bottom again.
Yeah.
You're
like, oh, right, this is it.
Right.
And had you cheated in other relationships before?
Every single one.
Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah.
I have a friend who just dealt with some infidelity, and their partner was like, yeah, I've every single relationship. And I was shocked to find that out. So do you think that that's more because of your addiction, your sex addiction, or more because of a way that you're programmed where you just aren't monogamous?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Very good question. There's, without getting into all the details of or scientific aspects of sex addiction, it's assholes still exist. Okay. People just do things because that's what they do. With the addiction aspect, you got to look at patterns. You got to look at powerlessness, unmanageability of your life, and everything like that. So when I went to rehab and started diving deep into that, I look back into the days of when I first started having sex when I was 14, and just from that point on, just how that took over my life and how I planned my day around it, how it became this need and necessity, more so, when people say, I was just a horny college kid, or I was just young and dumb and whatever. Right. And there's a difference, and that takes someone to do the work, the therapeutic work, to figure that out. But I'm not saying that everyone that cheats in every relationship is an addict. That's not the case.
So in your guys' book, which is great, by the way, I think that any person that's in a relationship should read it, even if I think it's helpful even with relationship dynamics like a mother-daughter or, daughter-father. It's just got a lot of really, really good tools in it. So if you guys haven't read it, it's called The Good Fight, and it's a New York Times bestseller. So yay for you guys. But you talk a lot about triggers, which, I've been in therapy for my whole life on and off. And that's a really important thing for people to know and to learn about going into relationships. When people ask me how my current relationship is so healthy, I always say it's because I showed up and was like, yo, dude, these are my triggers. This is what is shitty for me. What are yours? And like, we never fuck with them and treat them with the utmost respect, because you have to do that to have a successful relationship. So I'm sure when Jana, found out about all of your infidelity, that created some new triggers for her. So what are some of those, and what do you do to try and like ease that for her?
The thing is, that's a daily obstacle for us. Now, they don't always come up every single day. We don't always have to have a discussion around them every single day. But I mean, shoot, just yesterday, something came up around her where I was running some errands. I was actually going to the grocery store to get something for her. And she texted me and called me. I didn't have my phone, I didn't hear it. And she's like, you need to call me. I call her back and get a hold of her. She's like, where have you been? I'm like, I have we have Life 360 on our phones, and we can see where each other are at, which initially started as a boundary, but now it's kind of great just so we don't have to text each other, be like, hey, where you at? Where you going to be?
Right.
So it's more convenient now at anything, but it wasn't working for whatever reason. It just wasn't working. When she tried to look at it, she said my phone was off, or I logged off the app or whatever. And I looked on mine and mine was working. And so, that's a trigger, because she's like, you can't just blame technology. And in that moment, I was just kind of like, I don't know what you want me to do.
I don't have another answer.
Right. I don't have an answer. I plead the fifth. I don't know.
Yeah.
So those are things that have taken some time, and I'm still trying to work on my reaction to them, and being able to not be like, hey, motherfucker, I'm out here doing something for you, and you're going to call me and be like, what the fuck,
Right.
For me to be like, okay, this is deeper. I'm really sorry this isn't working. This is where I'm at right now. What do you need from me? How can I help you through this?
Yeah.
Let's figure it out when I get home. Something. So those things aren't always easy to navigate. And I'm one that I get triggered with questions. I hate being questioned. I hate being tested.
Mm-hmm.
And so she'll ask me, and she's a very inquisitive, curious person.
Yeah.
And so I'll take 90% of the questions she asks as a test, or as she's fishing for something.
Right.
And
which
I'm like,
defensive.
Yeah. Oh, I'm the worst. And that's some of my biggest work that I'm doing now, is to work on my reactions and not be defensive. And just the other night, I kissed her goodnight. She was like, what are you about to do? I'm like, I'm in bed. I'm going to go to bed. And even that reaction, she's not a big fan of.
Right.
She's like, why can't you just answer? I was like, well, why do you have to ask me? What the fuck am I about to do? I'm in bed. So it's this whole thing of navigating those moments that you can't identify as a trigger immediately,
right? But
being able to dive deeper into them, and for me to pause and be like, okay, what's behind this? What's going on? Let's talk about it. But yeah, so I mean, that's the biggest thing with triggers. I mean, kudos to you in your relationship now to be able to talk about that. And that's something that man, Jan and I both say if we're ever in another relationship, how we'd be able to go into it in a healthy way with all the tools we've learned.
Yeah.
Talking about boundaries and triggers and being able to communicate
Yeah.
from day one. What a gift.
Yeah.
You know, what a gift for people listening to this that could be able to do that.
For sure. And there was this meme that I saw a couple weeks ago, and it was like, you know, dating in your 20s, you sit down and you're like, what kind of car do you drive? Where do you live? What's your job? And dating in your 30s is like, have you done your shadow work? Are you emotionally stable? What are your triggers? Like, how long have you been in therapy? And it's so fucking true, dude. Like,
that's so perfect.
And it's so accurate, because when you can do that and come to the table from the get-go and be like, yo, this is all my shit, then there's no surprises and there's no like ouch spots that get triggered in fights. You know, it just like makes everything so much cleaner and healthier.
Oh, for sure. And then you're just setting expectations for each other that you're not this completely different person when you guys start getting in the weeds of the relationship. In our book, we use this analogy or this story that I read somewhere about Anna Kendrick. And she broke up with a boyfriend, a guy she was dating, because she set a boundary of hers where she hates being tickled. She's like, I don't like being tickled. And he thought it was a joke. He's like, come here. Like, he kept tickling her. And she's like, nah, player. Like, I told you, I don't like fucking being tickled. Don't tickle me. And she ended up breaking up with him because he wouldn't respect. Yeah. He wouldn't respect her boundaries. And she's like, and that's how it needs to be, though. Like, you can't minimize your own boundaries for somebody else. You state them how they are. If they can't respect them, then I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's so weird. I so deeply identify with that. Like, I get violent when I'm tickled and I'm like, I might kill you. Like, I hate it. That's epic. Good for her. Okay. So you just celebrated your 1-year sobriety. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that's a big deal. And I'm curious because it's technically an addiction. They call it a sex addiction. It's a known thing in our world now. And when you're sober from drugs or detoxing from alcohol and, you know, celebrating sobriety in that sense, you know, you're totally off it. Drugs, I know, are really gnarly. They're like, no, CBD, you can't even do that and stuff like that. So can you explain to me and for people listening that don't know about it, what is that like? You used to have to abstain from sex altogether? Or just outside of your marriage, or like, what does your sobriety entail?
So, yeah, it is tricky because it is new, you know, to society to be hearing this term. And it really sucks that the whole Me Too movement, like, I'm happy that happened to help people who have been victims of that. But the other side where the perpetrators, now there's so many of them claiming sex addiction. And it's like, that didn't give us a very good rap. Right. When it's like the Harvey Weinsteins and Kevin Spacey's are like, I'm a sex addict. You can't.
You're like, no, dude.
Like,
yeah.
Like, yeah, what the fuck? So that's the tricky thing about sex addiction, because you still use it, right? Like in AA and NA, like you're saying, it's pretty black and white. If you're an alcoholic, you don't drink. If you're a drug addict, you don't use. You know, Overeaters Anonymous and sex addiction is similar in the fact that you still got to eat. Right. You still got to have sex. But it's figuring out with, you know, a CSAT certified sex addiction therapist and your sponsor or people in the program, what personally, like, what are your inner circle behaviors? So your inner circle or your bottom line behaviors are the things that you'd reset your sobriety for. So this is getting personal, but that's the only way I know how, I guess, nowadays.
Well, welcome to FML Talk.
Right, that's how we roll. So for me, it's like no sex outside my marriage, you know, no pornography, masturbation, inappropriate conversations with women, really conversations with women that my wife doesn't know about. Right. Anything, any lies, any secrets, anything like that. So if any of that happens and is discovered, I reset my sobriety.
How many times have you had to reset?
Twice.
Okay.
And you know, both for reasons really around mostly lies and just, you know, flirting with the edge of inappropriate, right, you know, behavior. Again, nothing physical with anybody, nothing like that, but it's more so the biggest thing was like lies to protect myself and trying to act out in a way of like regaining autonomy without doing it in a healthy way. Which sucks. Like, you know, I wish it was 5 years I've been sober, but it's not the way the program necessarily works all the time. So that's the thing. It's different for different people. Some people, masturbation isn't a big thing for them.
Right.
It's not like the quote unquote gateway drug for them, so they can still have healthy masturbation. They figure that out with their people around them. They figure that out with what their spouses are healthy with or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it looks different for different people, but the biggest thing that's probably across the board is no sex outside your marriage or committed relationship.
Do you think Jana feels pressured to give you a certain amount of sex because of all of this?
So, I'm kind of an oxymoron because I'm a sex addict. I'm a sex addict in recovery, which is definitely different. But I'm intimacy avoidant. So kind of like I said earlier in the show, how like for me to like act out with somebody, like have an affair or whatever, have to be someone completely random I don't know. Mm-hmm. Right? There can't be that attachment. I've always been someone who struggled with intimacy in a relationship. So I get uncomfortable at times in those situations. I get uncomfortable with intimacy and touching and all that with somebody that I care about, because for me, in my pattern of life, I've never connected sex and love. They've been two completely different things for me in my brain. Mm-hmm. So now I'm trying to figure out how to do that in a healthy way and have both at the same time. Yeah. I've gotten more comfortable with it over time, but it's, Jana, her number one love language is physical touch. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the last on my list. So she's the one that's like having a harder time wrapping her brain around it, being like, you're a sex addict, but right. Like, let's have more, let's have more sex. So it's, that's a battle in itself. We go through periods where I have no issue with it, like with being comfortable around it. I'm all good. And then we have periods like dry spells where I'm just like, for some reason, my past shit's coming up. I'm uncomfortable. I'm just like, I need space.
So when you have those dry spells, is it that you don't want to have sex because the way Jana wants to have sex is more intimate and connected? Or is it that you just kind of like, do you not want to have sex, or do you want to just like pound it out like, rage style?
Right. See, Jana's like any guy's dream. Like she's down for anything. She every now and then she wants to make love and stuff like that, and every now and then she just wants to have sex. Yeah.
Because there's a difference.
Yeah. Absolutely. For me, it's more just, again, goes back to the whole cheating thing in itself. It's more just my shit. It's more of just, I just have moments I just feel uncomfortable. I have moments that even holding hands, I'll just kind of just want to like crawl out of my skin, and it has nothing to do with Jana, but that's the thing about this. It's so hard because sex is so personal, right? In a relationship that any woman would take it personal. When I try to tell her, like, it's not you, it's not about you, it's nothing to do with you. You're gorgeous, you're sexy, you turn me on, all of those things. Mm-hmm. This is just my shit.
Whew. Now you all see why I chose to break this up into 2 episodes. It was a lot of heavy material that we're covering, and the vulnerability and the openness and the honesty really does continue throughout this entire interview. So I'm excited for you guys to hear the rest of it next week. Part 2 is just as intense, if not a little more so, because Mike shares something that he has never shared publicly. And it's pretty heavy. Plus, I ask all of the questions that you guys submitted and wanted me to ask, and he bravely answers them all. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at FML Talk Podcast for all the behind the scenes and fun stuff that we are doing. I cannot wait for everyone to see this new merch line. You guys, the stuff in here is so cute, and it's coming just in time for Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day, whatever you might be celebrating. And I will see you next week for our part 2 episode with Mike Caussin. Until next time, y'all. Cheers.